Hello, welcome back to Toby's Sticks and Stones, My Life in Lyrics, My Life in Words rather, which is a precursor to the book, which will be coming out at the end of September, but is on pre-sale now. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background information about some of the songs that are going into the book and some of the key moments in my career as a songwriter. So again, I think with the same thing that I've mentioned about Big Bad World in a previous video, one of the key songs is No Solution. Again, a song that evolved over time, but I remember writing very vividly in my bedroom on an acoustic guitar. I've always written on acoustic guitar. I think that's the first thing to say. I've written a little bit on piano, a little bit on bass guitar, but mainly my trusty box of wood and metal is the thing that I use. But No Solution was inspired by a song on Bryan Adams' album Into the Fire, and it's called Rebel, and it was a song that he wrote for Roger Daltrey from The Who. I didn't know that at the time. I just loved the song, and I'd absolutely adored and still do adore the Reckless album by Bryan Adams. It was an album that revolutionized me as a would-be artist and as a would-be songwriter. Up until that point, my life had been Led Zeppelin, Queen, David Bowie, you know, all the usual suspects, Uriah Heep. And I unexpectedly fell in love with that record. And I think it was my awakening to my love of a pop rock aesthetic and a direction. And I think it has had as big an influence as anything I've ever listened to and ever been, fallen in love with musically. For all kinds of reasons. I think specifically because of that simple writing style and the direct lyric and the melancholy in a way. There's quite a lot of melancholy in Bryan's writing, which you don't think is often talked about. It's that lovelorn lyric writing. And I hadn't really spotted that sort of stuff specifically until that moment. And I'd listened to Reckless, still do listen to Reckless, but I'd listened to Reckless for, I think, 18 months, a year to 18 months, just almost like back to back. It was always on in my car and in my dad's car. You know, I used to work for my dad on the building sites, and I'd put it on, you know, when we were working, and just listen to it endlessly, you know, and it really got deeply into me. And anyway, I was in massive anticipation for the record that would follow it up. And of course, Into the Fire came out and it wasn't as big a success at all for him. And having met and become friends with Bryan, he says, oh, well, you know, that was my art record and it was an experiment, you know. But I still think that it's a fantastic record. But this song, Rebel, on the album is a fantastic piece of work. And it's a great story. It's a wonderful story about someone leaving home and returning, I think, you know, and other people's perception of this character. And that song has influenced me enormously right across my early career. I think, you know, songs like Kicking Up Dust and Don't Pray For Me have as much influenced by that song in terms of its makeup as No Solution is. And I just became wrapped up with this concept of this simple swinging acoustic thing. So essentially that was the sort of basis for the background of it. And when I started writing the song, it's weird because I'd watched a program about teenage suicide on TV. We used to watch, my dad, well, the whole family used to watch quite a lot of the sort of the news programs, and Panorama was a program that my dad used to watch religiously every week, you know. And so I often used to join him and just sort of, as a teenager, just kind of begrudgingly watch it. But I remember watching this particular program about teenage suicide and how difficult and how it was hidden, and how difficult it was for those left behind to deal with it, and trying to unpick the reasons why, and if there were environmental and social, what the social implications were, and what was happening in the country and all that. And it really affected me because a lot of the stories were kids of my own age, you know. So I went and wrote this. I wrote this song. I was inspired by that, and I wrote a song. I wrote the song No Solution as a result of watching that program, and coupled it with this love of this song Rebel. And so that's really the background of it. But you know, I've got to be honest, I didn't know anyone had committed suicide at all. I was using, I guess, observational stuff, you know, from watching that program, and I guess trying to imagine what it would feel like for my parents or for anyone that knew me if I'd had that terrible, I'd driven myself to that terrible point. And I think this is part of songwriting, is that you have to put yourself in the position of the protagonist or the antagonist, depending which way you're looking at it. And imagine what it is. It is about imagination, but there's a need to be authentic. There's a need to have a level of authenticity. So that's the line you tread a lot of the time. And I think with No Solution, that was definitely quite difficult. And I don't think I was really mature enough to do it well enough. But one thing I will say about the story of this song is that after we released the Don't Pray For Me album, I got a letter in the post because we didn't have email, of course, and all our fan mail was done by letters, and I used to reply to as many as I possibly could. And as we became more successful, we got more and more and more letters, you know, and it was very hard to reply to them all. But I got a letter from somebody in Australia, weirdly, that said that they'd bought the Don't Pray For Me album, they'd listened to it, and that song No Solution had stopped themselves from committing suicide because their brother had committed suicide. And it was a letter of thanks. And it really affected me. It was an extraordinary thing to receive. And I still think about it to this day. I don't know that person. I have no connection to them anymore. But what it gave me was that's what the power of music is, and what a responsibility we have as songwriters. Because it's everything that you write, everything that you put out has an effect. Someone's going to read that, listen to that. And if they're into the band or into the music, then quite often or not, just like I did when I was listening to Ronnie James Dio, or I was listening to Freddie, or I was listening to David Bowie, you're listening very intently to the words and you're trying to decipher what they mean, and you take your cues a lot of the time from those things. It's the stuff that you hoped you could say that you can't, that sort of thing. And so I think that was my awakening to the responsibility of a writer, to be as authentic as you can, to be as honest as you can, but don't preach. Just give a point of view, give a reference, give your reference point. And so, yeah, so I think a very important song to me. Like I say, it took a while to evolve, but I do think, weirdly, it's one of my favourite songs. And as a kind of slight sideline, this is the weirdest thing about it, is that when we were recording the Don't Pray For Me album, I met Bryan Adams on those sessions. And what was the song that he liked the best? No Solution. And he came into the studio, and I can remember him listening to the song, and I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I've written this song. I've kind of thieved it from him. And he was stood behind me. And he said, oh, I love this song, but I think I could help with an edit. And so I had this really weird, there was a surreal moment for us all where this superstar, Bryan Adams, was sat in a little room, an ante-room next to our recording, next to the recording studio that had a glass door. And whilst we were carrying on recording, Bryan had a 1/4-inch tape machine that we dumped the track onto, and he was trying some different edits for the track to try and improve the arrangement for us. Absolutely unbelievable, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy how the universe works, isn't it? But yeah, so a very important song, and yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this explanation. Thank you.